Welcome everybody to the infamous monthly webinar. Byron White here. We're going to start this webinar in a couple of minutes. I actually haven't had a chance to talk with Patrick yet. Patrick, are you on the line?
I'm on the line.
We're actually recording this section live now. We have not spoken. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us for this webinar.
Thanks, Byron. Good to be here.
Yes, indeed. So we're going to just go ahead and dive in. We've got some attendees listening in already, and this presentation has also being recorded. So I'm going to give everybody a brief overview of what's about to transpire, and make a couple of announcements that you'll see in a second. So here we have it. So we're going to have a fascinating guest. Patrick is going to give a presentation after I buzz through my presentation in about 10 minutes. And offer some insights into his vantage point over at CodeBaby, which is going to be really exciting and interesting for our fans over at Idea Launch here, and anybody else joining us. So without further ado, let me give you a quick sketch for what we're going to do. I've got a couple of announcements that are pretty exciting that I want to buzz everyone through. Then I'm going to go through my traditional monthly quick review of content marketing so everybody has a firm grip on what this revolution is all about and how it's changing the way we run our businesses. And I pulled up a few conversion enhancement tips that got a rave review both at Search Engine Strategies and Conversion Conference, a couple of conferences I spoke at, one of which I did a 1-hour solo session that was really pretty riveting, and I continue to get emails from people that attended that presentation. So I wanted to tune everybody into some of the insights during conversion that was one particular section of conversion enhancement. But without further ado, I wanted to announce a couple things. The first of which is we have a new publishing service over at LifeTips. LifeTips, I've started that company in 2000, and it continues to grow wildly. Matter of fact, after the Panda Farmer release, our traffic went up about 22%. We're driving about 1.3 million unique visitors over there now, and there's tons of content over there, but I've been struggling with how best to help entrepreneurs and business owners and CEOs, so I've launched this book publishing service that's part of LifeTips now that you can take a quick peek at, where you can become a guru at LifeTips, and you can see that my 101 Content Marketing Tips book is being marketed over on contentmarketing.lifetips.com, but we already have about 5 or 6 other business owners that I've worked with over the years and published book for. We've published about 55 books now at LifeTips, so it might be worth you taking a look at. CEOs are really looking to be thought leaders now. It helps with conversion, it helps with sales, it helps to establish your leadership position and speaking engagements and all kinds of fun things, so it's worth taking a look at. Another quick announcement, Writer Access is also going like gangbusters. We launched that business model 4 months ago. We've already put 8,000 orders through that engine. Clients are finding great ways to connect with freelance writers for paid assignments. The work is guaranteed satisfaction. You don't pay for anything that you don't like. We've built in levels of proficiencies to all the writers and screen them and all kinds of good things. And we have an API that feeds approved content over there directly into WordPress. We have a Copyscape originality verification, and it's just crazy. It's really revolutionizing the way that you can buy content safely and easily. Look for writers that have experience in your background. So here's a couple quick stats. Time to complete sites, 31 hours. Average word count, 31 words. Love list is an interesting term. When you can either select a love list of writers that you've selected using your advanced search features, so you can send a project out to either one writer or a group of writers you select, or maybe just everyone in level 2, first come, first serve. So as we have some really interesting innovations over there. Here's some other stats. By a single writer, we have one writer that's on 35 different lists. He's done a lot of great work for a lot of clients, and they like what he's doing. We have one writer that's created 339 single projects. We have a payment to a single writer with Writer Access is $7,265 paid to the writer, to a single writer. And then if you looked at all of the writers that we pay, we have, again, one writer that we paid $74,000 to, not just in the 4 months, but at Idea Launch, we do higher-end work as well. So most popular states are California, Massachusetts, New York, Texas, not too strangely off there. Size of state would seem to make it interesting. So, there's lots of fun stuff over here. I won't go through all these slides now because I want to do a couple of other things in my few minutes that I have before I turn the floor over to Patrick. But ordering is very easy with an engine we built as well. You can choose the project complexity and the level rating of the writer and the word count. So, there's fun stuff over here. I should take a look at this if anybody's interested. And I think I have a coupon in here for a $10 bonus trial offer that you can use if you're interested in that. But let's circle back to content marketing and the purpose of today's meeting and discussion and webinar. So I think it's critical that we all understand what content marketing is, and I have these 8 or so slides that I go through that I really want everybody to tune into. It is an art. Content marketing is an art of listening to your customers' wants and needs, and that's probably the hardest part of content marketing. And I think that's what Patrick is going to talk with today, is how can we listen to what our customers are doing on our websites, how they're acting, what's motivating them, how can we dig into what their wants and needs are. I think you're going to see some tremendous revelations in the marketplace in the next couple of years with how we learn what those wants and needs are. One of them getting a lot of attention is Google now with iPhone and the ability to essentially spy on your movements and your behaviors as you travel around. That is great data and great information, and I hope Google and Apple and everybody are able to hang on to the ability to track and monitor and measure where people are going to pop up relevant targeted ads to where they are at specific periods of time. The next part is the science of delivering content to them in a compelling way. And the big news here is that readers you need to reach readers with not just blog posts or articles. You need to be thinking about books and ebooks and RSS feeds and all kinds of other ways to distribute content. And that, again, is complex, it's difficult, it's challenging, it adds more tasks to your list every day to try to distribute content to a wide platform, but it is critical for success online. And catching readers, at the right time and the right place is also a challenge, but one that we need to focus in on. Is it an app? Is it a widget? How are you going to get your information out to people? If you think you can survive just by pushing information out to your website, you're wrong. You need to look way beyond the scope of your site and catch people at the right time and the right place, as mentioned. And the other key is with information they want and need. Webinars, workbooks, educational events like this one that we're all listening to. How-tos, how do you get good information to people? How do you learn what is great quality information? And we'll talk about that a little bit. And of course, it's testing campaigns to learn what works and what doesn't work, and finding the most efficient path to engagement. And again, all difficult and all expansive. Each one of these slides I could talk about for an hour probably. And not be repetitive. But let's dive into the conversion enhancement tips and advice again that I wanted to just go over with people quickly so they could get some good data from me here. First of all is on-page testing formula. I believe there is a formula that everyone should adhere to with regards to looking at what is on a physical page. You can certainly look at what's happening on the page and what action people take with clicktail and other elements and where people came from and where they go to, and that analytics is important. But at some point, you've got to analyze what is on that page. We've got to look for, are you earning trust with information that customers want and need? What's the usability of the page? How are you motivating people? Are you able to judge what is a good motivator and a bad motivator? Are you using A/B testing and multivariate testing to try to learn the answers to some of these questions? What's your incentive? Are you offering anything that is motivating people with some incentive or reward? What's the friction? This is the hard part. Is identifying what is the resistance, why aren't people taking the action that you want to, and how can you begin experimenting to reduce those pain points. That becomes a really difficult thing, and that's the negative motivator. That's what's hurting you essentially. And what anxiety do people have, which, by the way, might only be able to be learned by talking with people and asking them questions, or tuning into your customer service department and asking people, why didn't you buy? You're on the phone with me, but what would be on the site that would decrease your anxiety of why you didn't want to buy? Was it trust? Was it our brand? Was it something we were missing? Why do you buy on other sites versus ours? These are all important aspects of improving conversion rates. But I think one of the big things to discuss is a wonderful book by Barry Schwartz called The Paradox of Choice. There are a walk down your aisle in a grocery store will certainly convince you, or a visit to the next microbrewery you'll go to will certainly expose you to way too many choices, which is wonderful. It's great to have choices, but how does it affect our design and our copy and our the way we market to people, and how are there new rules for this whole complex decision-making process? And the answer is yes, yes, yes. There are new rules. There are too many choices. There are new strategy. There's new methodology that needs to be formulated to basically make all of this happen. So here's some testing words. Ideal Launch is very focused on content creation and optimization, distribution, and testing, publishing. Anything begins with content, chances are we've done a project or a few hundred thousands of them. So content is a big deal for us. So I wanted to just leave you with some interesting actual feel words to improve conversion rates, and actual sell words. And words are, in linguistics in general, are something extremely powerful, and I believe a big part of Panda Farmer, the recent algorithm released by Google, really took a much deeper dive at an algorithmic understanding of words that were strung together. And you can make it. There's a lot of discussion online about Panda Farmer and the removal of poor quality content, and we have our own theories, and we track about 1.1 million listing positions for a couple hundred clients as a part of Content 6 and Word Vision, our proprietary technology that tracks performance of content. But the net of it is we see a difference, and we see a difference with conversion improvement when you're using particular sets of keywords, and particularly in headlines and in other areas. These words are meaningful. They resonate. They say a lot of things. And so take a look at, here's some other sell words that, again, are some of them are popular, but others are aimed at some other things. It's very rare that we see a no-fuss sign-up, but we've actually used that word in testing, and it's worked. It's different. It stands out. So try and experiment with different words, and I'm going to get this deck available and send this to everybody that's here. So fear not on whether you're going to get this deck or not. I'll send it all over to you. So again, more positive versus negative sell words. Are you connecting? Are you identifying with people's wants and needs? Are you talking their language? Have you built out personas? If so, what do the personas look like? What of these, are some of the personas people that are more concerned and nervous nilly type people? Do they need to see perhaps negative keywords that better connect with them, particularly if it's longer content? Or do you have positive people that are looking for solutions to problems, quick solutions? I like saying that sometimes we market to ADD Andy and Sophisticated Sally. You might use different sets of words for that audience. And of course, widening the funnel, in looking at the preliminary initial glance on a page, the headlines, the visuals, maybe some video, or we'll talk about that more today. What is the preliminary view of the page, and heat maps and all kinds of other things that can help tell you what people are looking at and what they're interested in. And then, of course, there's the investigating, sort of element, and capability and action. So these are some great sites. There's a roadmap down here of New York that I love ending on slides, because I usually show a Boston grid of an antiquated architecture system versus New York, a logical workflow where you can actually find your place from A to B. You know, your funnel should be looking more like New York than Boston, even though I live in Boston here. Go Bruins, by the way. They just won their 7th game last night. Anyway, without further ado, I wanted to give everybody a link to where they can download the book for free. That's part of all of this, and I'll send you a link to my book, a PDF version of it. But without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Patrick. Patrick, welcome.
Thanks, Byron. Good to be here.
I'm going to switch over to Joshua is who I'm switching this over to. It's the only person that's listening. I'm thinking maybe you're on his box right now.
I'm on my box, but we'll hope that it's logged in as him.
Okay.
Do you
should have a prompt coming up on your screen.
Okay. Yeah. There we go.
That will take control of the system here. See if that works for you. That seem to work yet, or? There you go. I can see you just fine. A couple of footnotes for you as well, Patrick. I sent the links out to everyone that's listening in, so they'll be able to actually click on the links they received in an email from me if any of these videos don't happen to work the way that you want them to.
Okay. Well, yeah, I know the only way they're going to work is currently with the link. So we'll take a pause. So just again, thanks, Byron.
Sure.
I'm assuming that everyone can see my presentation now, and very much, you know, Byron, I very much agree with your notions on really, I think what stands behind linguistics and engagement is the realization that ultimately we're not measuring clicks, we're measuring human behavior. It's really human dynamics that motivate them to, you know, to want to be a part of on a website. And I think we're still very early understanding that the human that's behind a click. That's been a preoccupation throughout my career, but kind of particularly trying to understand online experience.
Hey, Patrick, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but people are not seeing
go online.
Patrick, so sorry to interrupt, but people are actually just seeing a blank screen to you, so I think you need to turn on your PowerPoint presentation, maybe. I was seeing your monitors, your desktop a second ago, but when you made the transition, there it is. I'm seeing your desktop now. Go ahead and try to just turn on your deck. Just run your deck full screen.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, let me just verify that it's on for you, so everybody. We're just seeing blank.
Okay.
So let's try to cancel out of that. Excuse the intermission, everybody, but let's just see if we can make this work. I can see your screen now. Click View. Click View, and then next to the Play button, there's a View button, or there you go. What do you want me to click on, Wayne?
No, that's not going to do it.
If under View there is a show slideshow.
We're looking for a View slideshow option. Is what, Wayne?
When I click, it's going blank, you're telling me.
Yeah, we just see blank right now. So
okay.
You can do it in the play mode if you wanted to, or in the trial mode over there. Perhaps never seen that happen before. I mean, I can see the screen there. You could make that wider and buzz through the slides if you wanted to right there.
Okay, yeah, it won't show any of the
yeah,
fill.
I would move down your notes there if you want and make it a little bigger. That's pretty good. A little wider.
Okay. So again, we're very early in understanding customer behavior when it comes I think, one of the encouraging is a ton of stuff in the domain of neuroscience. Oh, I'm hearing back here. I'm going to take it off. So
I think it'd be better to take it off. Yeah, you're buzzing in and out. Thanks.
yeah. So lots of innovation in the area of neuroscience to really understand what moves us to take action. And Byron, you alluded to Barry Schwartz's book. There's a bunch of others that are really trying to understand what is the kind of neuroscience, what's the social psychology that moves people to take action, to make decisions. And it turns out that the way that we function is that the initial reaction is really the old brain kicking in. It's the instantaneous millisecond thing that happens. And essentially what we're doing at the old brain level is really a pattern matching function. We're asking a question, is it friend or foe? Is it something I'm attracted to or repelled from? Is it something that makes me feel safe or feel threatened? And those pattern matching kind of reactions happen, again, instantaneously, milliseconds. And then after that initial reaction, we go through a process of really emotional processing. And it's how does it make me feel? And it turns out that it's really emotion that moves us to action. And this is the part of the problem of kind of the overabundance of choice. When we're presented with too much information, we tend to then kind of get prompted into this mode of thinking that, well, let me consider all the facts, let me consider all the information. And it turns out that we just flat out don't make decisions. It's really emotion that moves us to make a decision, and reason then provides interpretation after the fact. And this really is, to some degree, an accommodation because of the nature of the human brain. The human brain actually turns out to not be a particularly efficient computer, if you think of it in computing terms. We really, the process that I just described actually is a 4-second long process. And if you think that, every single algorithm and possibility was going to be considered, and multiply that by 4 seconds, and we simply end up in a paralysis of analysis. And so the way that the brain kind of compensates around that is to effectively preload decisions that are then triggered by emotion. And we've tended to operate with this historical bias and have kind of thought that, if that's the case, we won't make the best decisions. But it really turns out that those preloaded decisions are very effective. And it's reason that helps us modify those decisions after the fact. If you're interested, I find this whole business of consumer behavior and neuroscience to be incredibly intriguing. 4 books that I'll just kind of recommend quickly if you're interested in learning more. One is a book written by a guy named Antonio Damasio. He actually heads up a brain neuroscience and creativity center at the University of Southern California, and he wrote a book called Descartes' Error. And then applied a little more pop level, Daniel Pink wrote a book called A Whole New Mind. And then around this whole business of how we make decisions, if you're going to only read one book here, I'd recommend Jonah Lehrer's book, How We Decide. Neuroscientist, but very kind of popular presentation. And he really unpacks this whole theme of how the decision process works and really debunks what has been kind of a historical myth. And the myth has been this, that if we could all be perfectly rational and make absolutely rational decisions, that somehow we would make better choices and the world would be a better place. And it turns out that it's not the case. In fact, we make our best decisions when there's a subtle interplay between intuition, emotion, and reason. And when we, again, make our decisions with that kind of interplay and balance of those things, we make the best decisions. And it turns out we really have known this all along. Think about the standard advice that we give for test taking. It is go with your first impulse, and you only change that answer if you can definitively, absolutely prove that it's the wrong answer. And research shows that about 50% of the time, even when we think we're changing it because we know that that's the wrong answer, about 50% of the time we change it away from the correct to the wrong answer. Think about, too, the advice that we give to family and friends about the most significant decisions in our lives. We say, trust your heart, go with your gut. And so, again, it is really this subtle interplay between intuition, the old brain, emotion, and reason that leads us to make best decisions. And in case you're interested, there's a number of business books now applying these insights. One written by a guy by the name of Dan Hill, Emotionomics, very insightful. And then in the more consumer space, Biology by Martin Lindstrom. And then for the web space, a book I highly recommend called Neuro Web Design, written by a woman by the name of Susan Weinshanks. We know Susan well. She's actually kind of a friend of CodeBaby and does some consulting work with us, trained as a psychologist, but applying the insights of neuroscience to the whole business of web design. So again, the first takeaway that I think is important, if you're going to understand customers and customer behavior when they come to the online space, it's this, that you must engage customers at an intuitive, emotional level. It's a real human being, and kind of at the level of intuition and emotion is where we make most of our decisions and take most of our actions. And that's one of our challenges, and it's a non-trivial challenge, because when you think about the nature of the internet, it's infinite choice, right? It's a presentation of more information. There's always more information, just more. We can really actually apply emotional intelligence. We can address the issues. We'll be able to read what's going on with the customer. We'll be able to apply, our skill as humans to either get them to make the sale decision or to stay with us as a customer. Again, we just know that there's this dynamic of being able to engage personally and being able to apply basic principles of emotional intelligence and being able to read the situation in a way that kind of moves them to the desired outcome. Now, the part of the challenge that we've had is that, increasingly we have this proliferation of different channels for how we interact with customers. And, initially, first channel is, okay, now the telephone, arises. And so if you're around call centers very much, you'll learn that there's, tons of folks that are providing all kinds of training on how to create, very personal conversational style interactions on call centers, how to use soft customer service skills and to use voice to communicate emotion and to be able to listen for emotion and handle customers. Again, we basically said, if we can't get face-to-face, we can only get voice-to-voice, how can we make that as personal an experience as possible? The one place where we have some historical experiences, marketeers, where we haven't even been able to get voice-to-voice and yet still trying to figure out how can we make a more emotional connection, has been the space of TV. Think about TV. It's a space where we want to be able to move somebody to take action, but we know we don't get any feedback from the customer, and we don't have any ability to create a more human style of interaction. I think there's a lot of things where the context is somewhat analogous to the challenge that we face in the whole internet marketing space. And so there's been huge amount of energy. So much of the creative talent of the kind of marketing and advertising world has been devoted around, making the most compelling TV commercials. And I would argue when it comes to engaging emotionally, the folks that, put this to an art form are the folks at Hallmark. They've created these unbelievably compelling commercials that address emotional themes and engage at that more kind of human level. And so what I want to encourage you to do now is to just take a look and reflect a little bit on this whole business of the Hallmark TV commercial. And I know that you've got a link from Byron there. I'm going to wait. I'm going to actually take a pause for about a minute and a half for you to be able to watch one of these Hallmark TV commercials. Go ahead and click the link, and I'm timing and waiting now. Okay, I hope that all of you are able to see it. I mean, I have to admit, I mean, these commercials do go a little over the top, but they are really, really unbelievably effective in terms of just, you know, touching people at an emotional level. And if I could see you, I mean, when I see when I present this at online or offline conferences, is you can see these micro expressions, these kind of little smiles or gestures, and people be prompted to look to another human at some of the most touching points in the commercial, and that's just a natural human reaction. When something kind of strikes an emotional chord with us, we look to make a connection with another human being. Now think about the TV versus the online context, and again, the folks at Hallmark do have to go a bit over the top, because think about the challenge they face. I mean, TV has got the potential to be emotionally engaging, but not interactive at all. And so Hallmark has to hope that they move you with such powerful emotion that the next time you're walking through the grocery store, you think, you know, I ought to get a greeting card for, you know, appreciation or whatever kind of, and I'll divert into the greeting card aisle and prefer their brand over any of the other brands that exist. It's a huge challenge. The emotional connection has to be so powerful that it will persist potentially for days, weeks, or months until the appropriate point when you're going to be moved to act on that emotion. Now consider the online context. Infinitely interactive, but it tends to be an emotionally flat context. And so, you know, the challenge is when there's always more information another click away, how do you make that kind of analogous emotional connection? Now, when you frame it this way, it kind of begs an obvious question, which is namely, why not just pay the TV commercial on your website? And even as I say it, I'm sure that some of you are kind of going, yeah, that's not going to work. I mean, intuitively you know, in your gut you know that that's just not going to work. And in fact, it doesn't work for online customer experience. And in fact, if you go to Hallmark.com, you won't find a single one of those Hallmark incredibly effective, perfected to an art form Hallmark commercials on their website. And remember, these are the people who literally wrote the book on emotion marketing, another book that I would highly recommend. So why? And let's go back to the greeting card analogy, if you will. You know, I'm an old married guy. I've been married for coming on 32 years now, married way over my head, kind of one of the crowning achievements of my life. And another crowning achievement is I've been able to keep, you know, convince this girl to stay married to me for 32 years. And if you kind of knew me, you know, you'd realize enough of a schmuck that is a non-trivial accomplishment to be able to keep this girl married to me. For a lot of us, and you know, there's a season of life when, you know, one of the things that you do when you dig a hole with your wife is, you know, go and try and find the, you know, I'm sorry card or something that'll help get you out of the bind. So imagine you're in the greeting card aisle, and you're in that same kind of situation of, you know, emotionally charged situation where you need to find, you know, the right card. And so you're there and you're looking, and you're looking, you're reaching, you pull a card up, and again, I'm sure you've all done it. You pull it, you open it, and not quite right. Another one, scanning, looking, opening. Maybe that one, so you put it back in the thing a little sideways so you can find it again, and back and forth. Now imagine, you know, I'm in that highly activated state, and the clerk comes up from the greeting card aisle and says, "Sir, are you finding what you need?" "Oh no, messed up with my wife again, and just not find it." Now imagine the clerk said to you, "Oh, I think I know just the thing. Let me show you the latest Hallmark greeting card commercial." I mean, you'd think it was the stupidest clerk on the planet, right? Because it doesn't respect this highly activated context. What do I want? I want a conversation. I want an interactive, you know, style of encounter with the clerk where the clerk says something more like, "Okay, are you finding what you need?" "No, you know, blah, blah, blah. Here's what's happened." "Oh, well, you're in the humor section. You know, are you looking for a humor card?" "Oh, no, nothing humorous about this situation." And you want the clerk then to be able to say, "Oh, let me get you over to the husband sucking up to their wife section. It's the largest section in the store, you know, well-worn path there. You know, does that get you where you need to be now, sir?" "Yes, thank you so much. Now I can do it on my own." Again, when you're in that highly activated state, we don't want, you know, this kind of broadcast. What we really want is a conversation. And to understand kind of online customer behavior, it really is analogous to that dynamic that's going on in the greeting card. Customers are in a highly activated state when they're there, and broadcast is simply an unwanted interruption to that. It doesn't respect that highly activated state of behavior that the customer is in at that point. So one of the challenges is to be able to match highly activated state with a highly interactive style of experience for the customer at those key points. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with eye tracking studies. I want to have you look at one here in just a moment, but before you click on the link, let me kind of explain. If you haven't used eye tracking studies on your website, it's probably useful to understand where it has come from. Eye tracking studies really came from, again, advertisers trying to do TV commercials and to make those TV commercials as effective as possible. And so what the technology does is it actually triangulates where your eyes are looking on the screen and correlates that with what's going on in the TV commercial. So if you look at TV commercials, what you'll find is a highly fixated quality. And it's a little politically incorrect, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you look at an eye tracking study, it'll then take a whole group of people and create these swarms or these hotspots so that you can see where someone is looking. And similar techniques are applied to websites, but the nature of those eye tracking studies are fundamentally different. Again, if you go on YouTube and search and you look at a TV, you'll see that people tend to look at two things. Faces, again, that's where we tend to communicate most with emotion, or boobs. And I think that's got to be a very gender-related thing. So faces, boobs, the winning combination is if I can get, faces, boobs, product, or face product. But the emotional expression overwhelmingly comes through the face, and then the challenge is to try and associate the product with that emotional communication. If you look at a web eye tracking study, you'll see something radically, fundamentally different. And I want you to click now on the link, and as I'm going to talk you through as you're looking at it. So click on the link for the eye tracking study right now so that you can pop that up and see that video. This is an eye tracking study that was done on an IKEA website. And the way the technology works is that you'll see the little blue dot, and the blue dot is where somebody's eyes are looking at any point. The tails show the motion of the eyes, so you can see the pattern of how somebody is looking out around the web page. And as that dot grows, that's called a gaze, and so it's showing that somebody's attention is fixated on one particular point. But again, the extreme contrast that you see between TV eye tracking studies and web eye tracking studies is this incredibly activated state that humans are in when they're online. It is very much analogous to the state in the greeting card aisle where I'm looking, I'm looking, I'm looking, I'm looking, I'm clicking, I'm looking, I'm clicking, I'm looking, I'm navigating. And again, you'll see that all through this kind of one session on the IKEA eye tracking study. And so that leads to kind of takeaway number 2, which is if you're going to be effective as an online marketeer, if you're going to have the kind of needed insight that you have about customer behavior when you and I go online, it's that you must respect this highly activated human dynamic of online customer behavior. Broadcast-style interruptions just don't work. And so you have to figure out how you're going to match this highly activated with a highly interactive style of engagement to be as effective as possible. Moving on. Really, the approach of websites has changed little over 15 years. I mean, it's somewhat astounding that the basic approach of websites and browsers really hasn't changed much over the last 15 years. And it's basically this kind of read and click approach with this hierarchical navigation through, supposedly logically organized web pages. And granted, we're putting more kind of shiny objects, if you will, on the pages, but still it's this context of information overload and a real lack of kind of how we actually engage real humans. And it's an interesting progression because if you think about the development of how we've done websites, I mean, really the first wave of innovation was just to be able to do websites and put them up on the web and to come up with some standard usability. And so folks like Jacob Nielsen and others came up with these standard usability conventions of how the technology would work, and there'd be some predictability and some logical organization. That was really the first wave of innovation, if you will, around websites. The next was, okay, we've got these websites, how are we going to get traffic to them? And so all of the theme of search engine optimization and management and pay-per-click advertising, all the different ways we get traffic. And I would say the most, the next wave has really been, okay, so now how can we track what people are doing? A little too much, I would say now, focus on kind of clicks and not maybe enough focus on human behavior. But really, I think the next wave of innovation right now is really to say, how can we create innovations around the web that really are much more enlightened from a human perspective, a real growing focus on online customer experience and thinking more in terms of experience streams of humans through a website, and what are the kind of the context and outcomes, and how can we tune websites for different kinds of personas. One of the kind of innovations is what I would kind of term as a structural innovation on doing websites differently. And really the two most common of structural innovations for websites is the notion of landing pages and microsites. Landing pages are all about, I have one objective. So I'll have a landing page that's tuned for a particular kind of persona, and my objective is I want this kind of ultimate outcome. And more often than not, it's a single page that's just looking to capture a lead or get a sale or get some, kind of an opt-in or affiliation. Microsites really take kind of landing pages to the next concept, which is really, yeah, but ideally it's really these experience streams that are tuned for particular kinds of people interested in particular kinds of things. And I'm hearing about more and more companies and meeting more and more companies that are doing literally hundreds of different microsites, in some cases abandoning the notion of a main web page altogether and just simply having a series of microsites that are tuned around particular kinds of experiences for particular kinds of people. And I think both are moves in the right direction. And really, I think, social media is also an innovation of changing how websites function. I mean, the basic premise of social media is that I'm going to create a site that's organized around the whole theme of my friends in the case of Facebook. And so if you look at the Facebook page and think about, how does a website like Facebook work versus most websites, it is radically and fundamentally different, because the organizing principle of the site is not some hierarchical, logical organization notion, but instead, what are the things that I do to interact with my friends? So again, fundamentally different approach to doing websites. Now, I do think that from a business and from an online marketing perspective, the core innovation of social media is really borrowed emotion. It's really drafting off the emotion of a community. And by the way, I think it's valuable and legitimate, but it can only take you so far. The approach of CodeBaby, and there are other innovations. There are folks that are doing proactive chat and proactive triggered, kinds of engagement models. But we're trying to provide a similar innovation to change the dynamic of innovation. And we're doing that using a fully animated digital character to create a highly interactive conversational style of interaction. So we're trying to then understand, so who's coming and how can we create the most personally engaging experience for them? How can we apply basic principles of emotional intelligence, analogous to if you could actually do a face-to-face conversation with someone, and then engage and create this highly interactive experience that leads to conversion results. And there's a link, and I'm just going to talk through this customer example very briefly, and then you can go ahead and take a look at the link. But NetNanny is they provide internet filtering software for children. It's a subscription-based thing. Parents sign up to kind of keep their kids safe from experiences they don't want them to have on the internet. The primary way that NetNanny sells is through an opt-in trial process. So you sign up for a free trial, get a feel for how good it is, and then convert to a paid subscription. And so we created a conversational style interaction at that kind of key point, and that's the third link. I'm going to pause for just a moment for you to be able to click on that link and see the way that we're transforming the dynamic of interaction. So again, I'm going to jump in a little bit early just to kind of keep us moving here, but you get the sense of what we've done there. Without the results, without the character there, same exact page, without the character there, somebody's already kind of clicked and said, yeah, they want a free trial. NetNanny's had a 19% conversion rate. We continue the split testing. These numbers have been amazingly consistent. When that conversation is there, when we transform the dynamic of interaction, conversion goes up to 56%, almost a 300% increase in conversion. And we know it, again, it's not because there's some cute thing happening, but we've transformed the dynamic of interaction, respecting this kind of dynamic of online customer behavior. So the three points, or the third takeaway, I should say, is whether it's us or something like us, I think one of the key takeaways is to look to apply new techniques and innovations for creating a more human dynamic of engagement than what's been kind of this old approach of websites. And again, the three takeaways, if we're going to be as successful as possible with online customers, decoding, understanding their behavior, I think three key things. We've got to engage customers at a more intuitive, emotional level than what has been kind of the case in the past. We need to respect and understand this highly activated dynamic of human behavior and create highly interactive experience as well. And then finally, look to some of the emerging innovations for creating this more human dynamic of interaction. Final, I'll just end with a prediction, but I really think we're beginning to see what is, I would argue, kind of the fourth wave of innovation in the space of the web. And I think it's going to end with us, with websites looking a lot less like pages and buttons and clicks and looking a lot more like human interaction. So that's what I've got. And Byron, I'm assuming you'll take over moderating. Are we going to have time for Q&A, or what's the plan?
Indeed. I know I've pulled up about 721 questions for you. A great presentation, Patrick. Not really 700, but I know those are my personal questions. But feel free, everyone, to use the question format, and I'll get to all of your questions and present them to either of us that you direct them to. But here's my first question for you, and we can carry on here for maybe 10 more minutes to the top of the hour with some Q&A. So really think you're spot on with, of course, the emotions driving our decisions. And but my question for you is, we're all quite aware that some people are either more or less emotionally driven than others, and the extremes might be your typical Italian hot-headed, emotionally passionate, driven, person versus the calm, cool, collected CFO from Price Waterhouse. So people are different, right? So I was wondering if they're therefore, does it, how much, sort of how much emotional influence varies from person to person, and do you therefore design different emotional connecting points to people at different levels of emotional, sort of persona?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a great question, Byron. I think so. Here's one of the interesting things. As it turns out, emotion really, some of the neuroscience stuff, that's like universal. It's hardwired across the board. There are some differences in style and maybe the degree of emphasis or how explicit people will be with the influence of emotion. But it really is across the board emotion that moves us to decision and action. Now, the context, though, is quite different. So if it's something that is very personally motivating or it's a very personally, close to me personally topic, then I will be much more emotionally tuned and much more emotionally responsive because it's something that I hold close and personal. So I think oftentimes it's more about job function, and is it something that I'm really personally involved with, or do I hold it more at arm's length? Mm-hmm. So for us, we know that trying to play or trying to really leverage the human dynamic of emotion. If it's a business transaction that's kind of arm's length and it's not really, yeah, I care, but it's not, doesn't affect my wife and kids, for example, it's going to be, the role of emotion is going to be much less powerful than if I'm looking to buy a safer car because I want to keep my kids safe.
Got it.
So if I'm buying a fleet, just
so even what you're selling,
a purchasing officer buying fleet vehicles for, my delivery business, guess what? It's going to be very much about the specs. If I'm buying a car, for me personally, it's going to be about safety. It's going to be about image. It's going to be about dating. It's going to be about a bunch of more emotionally charged themes. And so, the calm, analytical purchasing officer buying the vehicles for the fleet is going to be a very different kind of emotional process for that same individual than when he's buying a car personally. Does that make sense?
It does. And the key part there was that, emotional connection may not apply for all products and services. Could you give us some examples? You gave us a couple there, but in your experience, where has emotional connections or even emoticons or, human connection, what products have you seen where either your product or one like it might not have had much impact and even could have hurt the impact? I mean, conceivably, that it might be a complete turnoff for some people. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and so again, we tend to focus on themes that are much more personally charged. Now, it turns out it's a pretty broad swath, but entertainment, travel, leisure, those are all. I don't go to a concert with my friends. I mean, there's a very emotional kind of a thing with that. I want to be entertained. I want to have memorable experiences. I want to have fun. I want to meet people. Personal products, hearth and home, products around safety. I mean, insurance is overwhelmingly, unless it's business insurance, it's overwhelmingly bought for reasons of safety, security, for, again, very emotionally charged themes. We're doing things in the internet gaming space and online gambling, very emotionally charged.
Got
so
it.
we tend to focus a little more on business to consumer, more of the consumer space because it's personal. And the farther it gets from kind of a personal dynamic of decision, it's probably a little less compelling in terms of, where a product like ours or, whatever technique around creating a more emotional style, engaging experience, probably not as powerful.
Got it. Thank you. That is a perfect answer. Someone has a question on interactive chat. Have you found this to be effective?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges of interactive chat, we're actually partnering right now with an interactive chat vendor, so we're becoming very kind of aware. Some of the examples of interactive chat that I see, I think are problematic because they don't apply good intelligence to the algorithms for when they pop the chat session. So, we've all probably seen and experienced the kind of offer to chat box that pops up. And it's like, there's no intelligence applied. I mean, somebody walked into my, home office and I spun around and I'm now talking to one of my kids and, I turn around, there's like this interactive chat and the only thing I can think is, well, I just didn't act for a little period of time and so it popped up the interactive chat because of where I was. I think the most interesting interactive chat things are getting triggered by proactive analytics. And so they're trying to understand, they're doing predictive things to understand who I am, behavioral patterns, to understand when popping that chat is going to most likely be effective and welcome. So I think some of the chat things end up just being, it's kind of like walking into the retail store and the clerk who walks over and says, do you need anything? And they keep coming back over and asking you that. Well, if I'm not sending some signal that would lead you to believe that I need help, then I just find that an annoyance. And I think that's one of the challenges of proactive chat. The other thing that we're actually doing is wrapping the CodeBaby experience around a chat session so that the character could say, hey, listen, I see you, I kind of get a sense you're maybe having some challenges here. Can I help you? And then maybe, some experience with the character, and if that doesn't resolve it, for the character to be able to say, I don't seem to be as helpful as I can I connect you with one of my live colleagues in our customer service center? And then segue into a web chat session. So we're looking for ways to be able to create an experience that makes that live chat session, if it's appropriate, as appropriate, relevant, and effective as possible.
I wanted to ask you about 3 different types of use for this sort of iconic human interaction or human, sort of connection, if you will. The first is, and by the way, what do you call your sort of your iconic, caricatures? What do you?
Well, I mean, obviously, we'd like the brand to be CodeBaby, but
okay,
aside from that, we're not quite Kleenex yet. So aside from that, we call it a digital character because it technically really isn't an avatar. An avatar is a character that you create that represents you, and really this is kind of the digital concierge, if you will, for the company. So we refer to it as a digital character, and that's fairly common terminology.
Well, I'm going with CodeBaby, so let's just brand that out. So I'm on the bandwagon. Count me on. Count me in.
Thanks, man.
So there are a couple of different types of strategy that you could use CodeBaby for. One is a push message strategy. One is a solve problems strategy. Another is sort of an entertain me strategy. Another might be, decrease your anxiety. Of all of those, could you talk a little bit about some of the variations that you've seen and developed for your clients?
So
and what's worked best?
Yeah, and it depends. I mean, we've created these standard conversation models, is what we call them. And so, for example, I think your first example, we call a call-to-click conversation, because a lot of times you're just looking for somebody to make any click, right? They hit your website, they hit your landing page, and your biggest challenge is just get that first click. And so one of the kind of very effective conversations that we create is we call a call to click. And most often it's call to first click. You just got to get somebody in the click screen. You got to get them to engage at all to have any chance of getting the outcome that you want with the customer. So that's a very common example for us. And then there are some things that are just inherently somewhat complex, and those could be a form fill or a web wizard process. And so in a number of contexts, whether it's lead capture or form fill or whatever, we can kind of warm up that experience and make it easier to understand and feel friendlier, and it's all these things that get better results. And again, there's a range of other things: cross-sell, upsell, add to cart. So we've defined all of these kind of standard conversations and understand then how we can marry those with personas and brand identities to drive better conversion results on websites.
Got it. And so are most of the projects you're developing, they're there to improve conversion rates, I'm sure. I mean, that's the measure in ROI success for your product. Is that correct?
Overwhelmingly, but you did touch on another theme that I think, there is some brand identity and just general online customer experience enhancement. And so we're also doing some projects that I would put into the category of gamification. It's not as much of a what's the improvement in conversion rates on this session, but how can we create experiences that create better brand identification, that create kind of better stickiness and or return. And so gamification is, I think, a big, hot, growing theme around online customer experience, and how can we create these entertaining game-style experiences that create more engagement over the long haul. So I would say probably 80% of what we do has got a very direct, hard, optimized conversion behavior on this session kind of objective. But we are also doing some things that I would say are a little broader brand, gamification, online customer experience kinds of projects.
How do you want, first of all, I want to thank you for joining me today. I could go on forever, but we love a hard stop here at 2 o'clock just to trim this down so people will be encouraged to see a replay of this and or see it for the first time. But how do you want people to get a hold of you and or anybody at your company if they're interested in learning more or a demo of your product?
Yep, our website, of course, CodeBaby.com, and I have a regular blog there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, so there's lots of ways to connect and follow. And but again, the easiest way is if you get to our website, you'll see the blog that we've got there, and you'll see all of my personal ways to connect on social media, and so very, very active. You know, I'm very interactive around blog and in the social media space as well, and as you know, Byron, at a lot of the industry events. So always excited to learn about innovations and things that people are doing with customer experience online.
Terrific. Well, I want to thank you once again for joining this fabulous webinar.
Thank you so much.
Terrific. Thanks, everyone, for listening in. Until next month, I hope your life's a little smarter, better, faster, and wiser with some great information on this fantastic topic. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next week, next month. Maybe next week, but probably next month. Thanks, everyone.